Okay. Okay. Well, hello. Hello. Good morning. Good evening. Good middle of the night to you all, whoever and wherever you are. And before I launch into anything, I hope you have something to write on or draw on. Blank paper is best, but if you don't have blank paper, whatever. And something to, if you have crayons or markers, because we're going to do a little bit of drawing. Pencils are fine. Um, Pens tend to go directly into left brain thinking. So I like things that are a little less left brain thinking than pens, but whatever you have, but I hope you have something. Um, and thank you all for being here. There are a few of us, and that's really great. We weren't sure, Eric and I were talking, we were saying, will anybody show up this early in the morning or in the middle of the night, depending on where you are. Um, thank you again, Eric, and thank you to Eric's team, who I'm sure you've got some folks help. A crew. I was thinking about that you gather the pieces, all these pieces to put together this work of art, which is the creation of a festival. The festival is a work of art. So thank you, Eric. I don't know how you do it. This workshop is an experimental workshop, and it is a fluid workshop, and it's on fashioning fiction from fact. Okay, that is taking our lived experiences, and perhaps we've already created personal stories from things, or are thinking about it, but instead of doing it as documentary personal story, doing it more as fiction. There are lots of reasons we might want to do that, but let me just say, I grew up on fiction. I was a big fiction reader, and I love fiction. And it's a way to take us into truth without having to stick to total facts. What I do know about fiction, and we think of novels generally, but short stories, of course, as well, but also plays are fiction. And but even though they're fiction, a lot of what the material is the author's lives, the author's lived experiences. And most likely, even fantasy is to some extent because whoever's creating that work of fiction, some piece of them is going into there, even if it's just motivation of why to do that particular thing. Personal stories have become like the du jour. I don't know about all of in Germany or even in India, but here in the States, and I know a lot of places, personal stories in the last 20 years or so, which is good and fun. And one thing that's come out of that are these things called liars contests. I don't know, there's various names for them, but they are 3 or 4 storytellers get together and they tell a story, a personal story, but one of them has the assignment to have what they're calling a lie in the middle of their story. That is that it really wasn't a personal story. I don't think fiction is lying. I think fiction, I just don't think fiction is lying. And I don't know how, and it's a game, and I know a lot of people who enjoy that, but I don't see fiction as lying. I see it as art. So, it's just a way to think about it. So in this is a very short workshop here. I want to look at things that how to take a personal story and shift it, not necessarily, change this whole thing, but wait,
That's beautiful.
yeah. Claire wrote, art is the lie that tells the truth. Right on, Claire. I mean,
Well, that's not original to me. I think Picasso said that.
yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, for me, storytelling is a way to put truth and beauty into the world. Okay, so what do we mean by truth? So I was telling stories to very young children today, which I haven't done in a long time. And, you know, they're totally silly, but they are dead serious. We know that folk tales, for example, are telling us how to survive in the world, and that there are crocodiles in the world, and that we have to outsmart the crocodiles and all of that sort of thing. So, you know, fiction it's very important, and it's absolutely rooted in the fact of our lived experiences. It's just done metaphorically. So, so how do we do this if we want to? All stories are true, and some. I don't see the end of that. I guess I could get it up. I don't have my chat on. I just have things that are
It
showing.
doesn't matter. It's almost the same as Claire said, and some of them really happened. Yeah.
Well, all right. So years and years ago, I was telling stories at the Museum of Natural History in New York, and they asked me to do some Hanukkah stories, which was very interesting to me that they wanted that. So what I did was I just went and used it as an excuse to go read the part of that story, the Hanukkah story, where the candles, the oil lasts 8 days. That's the part of it people remember. But that the oil lasting 8 days, because the Romans had done a siege on the temple and everything was gone, and there was just enough oil to last one day, but it lasted 8 days until they could get more oil in the light that's never supposed to be out. And somebody said, but that is, you know, is it true? What? And I said, just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it isn't true.
Mhm.
That's what I said. That's what I channeled that day. Just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it isn't true. But that's a different topic. But I want to look at how to share something, but not, you know, not the entire thing. Maybe that's why we're doing it, or not the exact thing, but mine our lives for, you know, to put some fiction into the world. So I thought I would tell you a very short story and then see if you can figure out which part of it is the truth and which isn't. This is the beginning of a story that I put together a few years ago, and I have told it. The small town of Baños, Ecuador, sits suspended on a narrow ledge of ancient granite. It's bounded by a deeply canyoned river, the Pastaza River, and the vertical Andean slopes of Mama Tungurahua volcano. Its in-town waterfall points directly to one of the hot springs the town is famous for, that it's named for, baños, baths. You can submerge yourself in slightly sulfury mineral water and feel the electricity of the waterfall-infused air. And you can listen to the soft splash of the falls. And if the volcano is erupting, you can hear the deep booms and feel the rocking of Mama Tungurahua. This conjunction of living elements excites the senses. It ignites desire. And into this town came a traveler. She arrived at the Posada de la Inca, a small hotel near the waterfalls, quite near the waterfalls, the night of the new moon. Her plan was to stay the 2 weeks of it, increasing the light of the moon before venturing further east, going down into the Amazonian interior of Ecuador. And she was seeking rest and restoration. She did get a bit of rest, yes. And she was restored, but not quite in the way she'd envisioned. She met the hotel manager her first morning when she stopped at the front desk to leave her key before heading out for breakfast, because you didn't take your keys with you. There he was. She recognized him immediately, the being that she always met and knew as the beloved, the beloved. She always recognized him when she saw him, and she always adored him. This was some particular spirit she'd known in various manifestations in this lifetime and in her way of thinking in other lifetimes as well. And she wasn't quite sure what it all meant, but she didn't worry about it too much. She just noted it and enjoyed it. And he knew her too. He knew her too, and he wanted her the minute his green eyes fell into her dark blue ones. Oh my God. Oh my God. Even though this woman had more than 30 years on him and was a bit frayed about the edges. She wasn't worse for wear, mind you, but a woman not just of a certain age, but quite beyond it, quite beyond it. But he was definitely in his prime, not the teenage hormone-driven prime, the solid, I know who I am, and I am a prime specimen, prime. And so these two people met or re-met each other. But this was crazy. He was 42 and she was not. He was a mad British adventure traveler, mountain biking, whitewater rafting. He had even bungee jumped off a bridge or two. And he was sexy as hell. A kind of compact Sean Connery type. She was an expat American. She was something of an adventure traveler too, but more internal adventure at this point. Definitely not looking for long distance biking or jumping off of bridges, at least not literally. As for being sexy, the attitude in her ass had been transferred to the twinkle in her eye. So he was at the front desk when she came through the lobby on her first morning in Banos. He introduced himself and shook her hand. You just let me know if there's anything you want, he said. And that is when their eyes locked. That's the opening of a story. A lot of it is true, and some of it is not. So any thoughts as to what's true and isn't true in there? Anybody got any thoughts? Was the place real? Is the place real?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've been very lucky. I've traveled a lot into some very interesting places. And I like to share them. But my travels aren't necessarily adventure travels and not necessarily full of really good story, but I like to share the places. So this story to begin with was set in a place that I really wanted to share. And yes, that volcano erupted a lot and covered the town in ashes sometimes. And there was the waterfalls and the hot springs. Those hot springs is where the Incas stopped on their way between Quito and Cusco at Banos. Banos means bathtub, baths. So yes, the place is real. How about the characters?
Well,
Any thought?
regarding the man, I was a little bit older than you described me.
Oh, very, very funny, yeah, Eric. No, the man was 42.
So I was a little older.
But yeah, and that's me. I mean, that is me, except that it isn't. The two characters. So what I did, it's not that I totally dropped fictional characters in, which is something that I do sometimes. If there's a place and I want to share the place, I will invent characters to have some sort of adventure or, coming together in the place where I had, where what I'd seen and that I wanted to share. But these two characters, that's me and the man who was I was volunteering with kids for 2 months there. So a lot about both of us is true, but a lot about both of us is not exactly true. So what I did was shift them. I didn't shift Banos, but I shifted them a bit. So, and this is just the opening of the story, but that scene never took place because that he was not the manager of the hotel where I was staying, but he was the manager of where I was volunteering. So I took it and I tinkered with the two of us and a thing that was happening with us, which was we had nothing in common, but there was a spark. So I just took that spark and expanded it out, changed this whole thing, but it still was us. And we did some of the adventures. So when the volcano started really erupting, he came in and took a group of us up the mountain to watch it. In the story, it's just the two of them. So that experience of watching the volcano in the story is true, but that the scene in particular didn't happen. So that's what I mean about, taking up a story. I mean, what are some of the reasons you might want to take a lived experience and change it? Change it. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts, about why you might want to do that.
The memory could be too painful.
The memory could be too painful. So a way to share the memory, but just take it away from that particular edge, maybe the memory could be too painful.
To protect real people who might be hurt or upset if they felt that they were being written about and in today's society libeled or something like that.
Right.
Might also be to make the story more coherent. If there are missing parts, you don't know, you have to bridge the gap in a way.
Yeah.
If you're writing therapeutically, you expand the situation, and by putting it at a remove, you can get a different perspective.
So, in the therapeutic mode, if you're working on personal stories, then you can change them. What if this had happened instead, or this is what I want to happen? There are a lot of ways to figure it out, what happened, and then shift it. Right.
Also, for the story's purpose, you can be creative, and you can have fun. You can be inventive, playful.
Yes, absolutely. So, it doesn't have to be the fraught thing, but it just can, yes, expand it out into a more playful thing. Yes.
Hi, Regina. I also feel that when we speak from our experiences, the characters that we create and the experiences that we talk about them undergoing, it doesn't come from the heart, but it comes from the body. It's very, very different.
Have any of you
I'm thinking.
Oh, I'm sorry, Claire, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking about Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, if anybody saw that movie, which gave a very happy ending to Hitler. It's but anyhow, it's rewriting history from a fiction point of view, and it's very cathartic. And I think that by casting a victim as the hero, or staircase wit, when I wish I had said this, and so the story changes, so I had said that, and changing the ending can be very useful in making
it.
Changing, this is the conversation you had, this is the conversation you wanted to have. This, so that's like, what are some of the elements that, that change the people, change the conversations?
It could also, it could also expand your audience by putting different characters in or manipulating the setting, an audience who might think this doesn't apply to me or I can't relate to it might find a way to relate.
Have any of you ever done this sort of thing?
No.
All right, well, here's your chance.
Regina, I have a question regarding this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a question, and I personally have encountered this in my life. I have told a part of my story from my real life, a personal tale, and my character, it's about me and my father. My character was picked up, and then it was retold by another storyteller as an interaction. So it's not the question of ethics where your story is being told, right? Because we know that's not right. But this storyteller didn't necessarily do that. She spoke about my interaction with her, and in that interaction she weaved in parts and pieces from my life, and she actually layered the character the way I am. Right. So it's not necessarily my story has been retold by her where the question of ethics come, but it's as if a character has been created because she is also not telling the story from the I space. She is telling the story like you did, right? She and he. So where exactly do we draw that thin red line that what can be done and what can't? Because I was not at all okay with that. And I, I was not okay with that. She didn't ask me for it. And when I told that I was not okay, she said, But it's not you. I haven't mentioned Priyanka. And I haven't mentioned me as me. It's an interaction between a she and a she. So, how exactly we deal when we are actually talking about real life people, but we are transporting them to another space and another time?
Well, I don't know. That's a very good question. You may, does anybody, off the top of my head, I don't know where you draw the line, because I was going to ask you, did she ask you? Well, she didn't. So that's kind of, see, a lawyer time, no? Like, I hadn't even been thinking in those terms, you see. I was just thinking of totally making fiction from your own life. She is making fiction from your life, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but at the same time, if you look at the manager at the volunteering farm where you volunteered for 2 months, over there, it's also his life, right? When you are speaking about your life, you are also speaking about his life. So that's where my question comes from.
Well, I'm drawing him as a character. Well, that's an interesting thought. I did send the story to him. He loved the story.
I think part of it depends on, do you change enough details that the person that you're basing the story on is not recognizable? Or do you combine that person's personality with some other traits so it really does become fictional? In this case, the woman, it sounds like she created something too close to home. It's too raw, and it's you. And um, I could easily understand you being offended.
Yeah.
And she sounds like she's being insensitive, but also she thinks she's created fiction. And she doesn't realize that this is too close to home.
Well, there's a lot of a lot of novels, a lot of stories in novels. This goes on in a lot of stories and novels, and I don't know if some of you may know the American author Thomas Wolfe, many years ago in the 30s, 40s. wrote a book about his family in North Carolina and his town in North Carolina, Asheville. And there were a huge outcry. And so then he wrote another novel called You Can't Go Home Again. Because so I think this goes on a lot in fiction. People, recognize exactly. If you know the short story writer Alice Munro, won a Nobel Prize. A lot of her stories, if you know what her family life was like, they're straight out of there. And there's a lot of a lot of abuse, all kinds of abuse in those stories. And when the real stories came out about her actual life and all the people in there, her husband, her father, all these sorts of people in there was a hue and a cry. She'd already won the Nobel Prize. I think that's in a lot of fiction. It just is. There's a lot of books who come straight out of people's lives. And I'm sure there's a legal line that gets crossed somewhere, or somebody can take you to a lawyer. That's not what I want to do the workshop on. I want to play the game to create these stories. But that is something that happens when people write fiction and it comes out of their lives. But most people's fiction comes out of their lives to some extent. So, and then so the author has to be very careful and to make sure they're not writing about something that's going to really affect the people they're writing about. I mean, I know somebody who worked for a very, very, very famous person in the an author. It was a theater author. She worked for that person for 20 years. And by doing that, she knew a lot of very famous people. And everyone said to her, when are you going to write the book? And she said, not until they're all dead. And she never did write the book. But she had been working with, internationally famous stars and people, along with her boss, who was an internationally famous writer. And she wouldn't write the book. So, that's a whole other issue. But yeah, that person did not ask you and it was that close to home. But I think if you start looking in if you know the plays of Eugene O'Neill, You Can't Go Home Again, it's absolutely his family. Absolutely his family. And he made no bones about it. So that then becomes a legal issue, I think. Or a personal issue with those people. I don't know. But if we, when we create fiction, where's the material coming from? Well, we say it's coming from our imaginations, all right, but somewhere in there, it's still going to come from some experience that we've had that makes us interested in it, even if we create a whole other cast of characters, which we can do.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. So usually when I travel to San Francisco to be with my son, it is a very, what can I say, uneventful trip. Like you go to the airport, take a flight, go there, and he comes to pick me up. But one time at the security, they said, can you come aside? We want to check the bag again. And I was taken aback. I said, what are they expecting? Anyway, I went, they checked it, and then they told me to go ahead. So, but I was a bit flustered and I just wanted to make light of the event. So at the Bay Area Storytelling Festival there, I just created a story to make light of the incident. And I just said, added a few things like, there was a sniffer dog and he came and he checked the bag, and there was some food which he was sniffing, and then he picked it up and ran with it, and the officers ran behind it, and I picked up my bag and just went ahead because I was wondering what they were going to look for. So I guess that was okay.
Why not? Why not? I mean, and it's a very common experience, right? Like these things keep happening to people. I remember coming back from India when I was in Chennai, and Anita Ratnam gave me an incredible mala made out of cardamom seeds. I mean, she put it around my neck and I bent forward. And I said, I don't know if I can get it through customs coming in. And I managed to get it through customs. It's hanging in my apartment. But, it's your story, but you can, that's what we're looking at. How do we expand on our stories? And, so you had the sniffing dog and all of these things, it's like, that's how we make fiction, isn't it? I don't know. You can, so so if we have our, I like to start with place. The reason because I'm very interested in place. I'm really never interested in, particularly interested in action. The actions are, they might be very interesting actions, but I'm not an action person. I'm interested in characters and place. So the characters are where you can get into trouble, because then if you're using people that you've met, and it maybe you want to make a story about somebody you met just because they were an interesting character. So it's how do you carefully create that interesting character without stepping on the toes of or hurting deeply the person that you're basing your character on. You have to be mindful. You have to be very mindful. Why let the truth get in the way of a good story? Says truth? Qu'est-ce que c'est truth? What is truth? So that, there are various things you can change. If, and why would you want to? Well, for me, it's wanting to share a place and not having anything dire happen in that place, but wanting to share the place. So that's, and so then I just invent. I was in Bali. I was some amazing places in Bali. I wanted to share them more than just sitting down with my friends and saying, oh, let me describe this temple, because, Bali is just an amazing place. So what I did was I invented a couple who meet at a dance at a Durga. A whole thing is Durga, and it's a fire dance all night and all this, and they don't quite meet, and then they meet at another temple. These are the places that I'd been, you see. And I had experiences, but nothing happened other than I was at those places. But I invented this couple. So the couple were totally made up. And hopefully I didn't get in any trouble describing the places or, some of the ceremonies I was in. But I had the couple experience them, not me. But you might meet somebody who is just an incredible character and want to just write a story about that person. That's when you have to be mindful, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of fiction that, people recognize themselves in, and it can get into problems. But you may have just been to an event and you want to describe the event. And so you describe something happening either to you or, you invent some other people experiencing the event that you're witnessing, or the thing that you're witnessing. And it's fiction, it's not a personal story, but you were the one who saw that thing happen. There may be conversations you hear that are so amazing that you want to put them in the mouths of somebody else in a story and not use the people. You can change you can change the plot into what you wish had happened. And
Eric
I think that
has his hand up.
oh,
Yes.
I can't. Yeah, I don't even see it. See, now I'm not seeing people. I would rather get me down small so I can see. I have no sense of who's here because it's all. Oh, there. Oh, okay, good. Oh, now I can see you. Okay, go.
Yes. Well, I first visited India in 1988, which is what, 37 years ago?
Sounds
And
good.
then in around 1995, which is what, about 30 years ago, I made up a story about a group of teenagers from New York who visited India. And they go to visit tribal people in the forest. When I made up that story, I had not visited tribal people in the forest. I had been in India, but I had not gone to the forest very much. After I made up the story, I ended up living with tribal people in the forest for my PhD research around 2003 to 2005. So this was a case of uh, I when the story came to me about this group of teenagers going to visit the tribal people in the forest, I had not experienced it yet, and I was not even aware uh, when I made up the story that it was a fantasy version of my own life. I mean, I didn't really think about it. But in retrospect, I realized I had replaced myself with a group of teenagers.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, you know, it's like there's something happening and you want to do it, but you haven't done it. So you create somebody else to do it.
Yeah, you know, we know what teenagers represent, right? A group of teenagers, they're coming of age, they're in that very transitional, exciting, and dangerous part of their development. So somehow that fit my story more than the kind of boring reality of a middle-aged individual going on the journey.
Hardly boring, Eric. If that's what you did when you were a middle-aged person, you cannot call that boring. I'm sorry.
But it's more interesting to think about a group of teenagers than it is to think about a middle-aged man.
But the middle-aged man could have those same exciting internal experiences.
Yeah.
And have that same, you know, and epiphanies and challenges and awe and wonderment and encounter with another culture. So you just transferred it to, you know, to give that the dynamo part, the dynamics of the youthful group.
As I say, it wasn't a conscious decision. It was just a story that came to me. Another way that the story is more exciting than the reality is that I studied, you know, folklore. I'd studied the way people were telling folk tales, and finally I settled on children's singing games, and how they were learning language through the singing games. In the story, which I created before I did the field work, in the story, the visiting teenagers learn about a flower that has a very strong medicinal power that the tribal people know about. And together, the tribal people and the USA teenagers help many, many people with that medicinal flower. So that is more exciting and interesting to me in retrospect. You know, that teamwork and helping people with the flower is more exciting than some middle-aged man scholar studying, you know, the way children studying storytelling.
You might want to try to rewrite that story as a middle-aged man who goes through massive epiphanies and transformations and sees parts of himself he never saw before. Come on, Eric, I won't accept that from you.
Yeah, I think I agree with Regina. I am a middle-ager myself, and I'm totally, absolutely loving my these days interacting with a lot of people with a whole variety of experiences, including storytelling. So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, Eric, if you need tips on how to make your life interesting, just message me.
Thank you.
But you know what, Eric? I think that your story foreshadows a few different developments.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the idea, first of all, you did go to live with some tribes and you have collected tribal folklore. And you do bring people together of different ages and different groups to work on healing, whether or not it's an actual physical medicine. So there's a wish fulfillment there. And you also have worked with a lot of young people. And so you have the advantage of not being in that precarious state so that you can direct some of their energies and corral some of their creativity. But you also can relate to them and be sparked by and inspired by that energy. You wouldn't be successful with them if they didn't relate to that in you. So, yes, right now you're not able to bring excitement to you, Eric, middle-aged man studying storytelling. You brought that excitement to the part of you that is young and found something much more exotic. But
and also, not only in reality, I'm middle-aged and a man, but worst of all, I'm white. Who would care less what a middle-aged white man has to say about anything? It's the least sympathetic character in the book.
You got to work on that, Eric.
And yet you run the world.
Well,
wait, I'm 82 years old. I am not going to accept the fact that you're telling me, because when I was a teen, I knew nothing about nothing, man. But, the older I get, the more interested and interesting I think that I get. So I'm not accepting this from you, Eric.
Okay.
I also think it would be interesting to say, if you're looking back at yourself at the age of 90, what do you think about middle-aged Eric who did this? I mean, it sounds to me that you went off to a new country, a new continent, and possibly a new field that culminated and combined other aspects of your upbringing and life. And also perhaps there was a practical issue of, if you were pursuing a doctorate, you had to narrow down a certain field to do technical research. That was not where you were really saying, okay, I'm going to write the most creative story that I can. In the real world, you got your PhD by focusing on a topic. But the other thing is, I also think that when you were 5 years old or 10, you didn't envision yourself as a middle-aged man studying, children's games and songs and things like that. So you've got some different perspectives. But also the perspective of the music that perhaps you saved or called attention to or something. What are the songs saying? Well, Eric, if you hadn't done this, what would have happened to us?
So I guess one of the things that we're way off. I have these massive notes about what we're going to do, and of course, I'm following, the group. The group wants to, what the group wants to do. But one of the things I have here is who's telling the story. So, all right, going to that group. Okay, who's telling the story? And try writing it 5 different ways from 5 different perspectives. Whether it's Eric at age something, or just random people at different ages, or the wall. The story of the group that comes, or the story of the middle-aged white man who thinks he's boring, as told by the tribes people, and who then created a chant, and for generations to come chanted about this strange but interesting man who came from America. Okay, or the mirror that was on the wall somewhere that saw the whole thing backwards. How fantastic would that story be? This workshop originally was and is designed to say, what what are different ways to look at something that's already happened or that is happening? You know, how many different ways can we investigate and go down and look at situations? How many ways can we see things as we think they happened? Maybe what you experienced when you went there literally wasn't what really happened because you missed this whole part of it. And for sure, the teenagers missed a huge chunk of it because teenagers are not seeing everything. We don't see everything. So just see the same story, but from different perspectives. You're hearing that story from us in different perspectives.
Mhm.
I'm just rapping here. I'm just rapping.
I have felt stuck. I have been told, oh, I'm sorry, Barry had his hand up. Go ahead, Barry, instead of
Well, I just wanted to say, and I apologize, I came in late on this, Regina. So just, tell me to be quiet if I'm taking it in a different direction. But actually, going back to what you were saying when I first came on, which was the notion of maybe you really want to tell a story about a place or about a person, and you kind of build events around it so it becomes a story. And this reminds me, and I'm assuming, Regina, you are probably familiar, and maybe Eric, maybe Claire, but one of the leaders in storytelling in the US, I think, is Donald Davis. And I remember when I first got into storytelling when I was in San Diego in the 90s, and I went and heard Donald Davis tell stories, and I just sat there in the audience rapt. And I just thought, I can't be a storyteller. I would listen to a 10 or 15-minute narrative of his real life story. And then I would just think, I can't be a storyteller. I have not lived a life like his. And then you stop and you think Donald Davis just told about what it was like to walk to school when he was 8 years old. And it's the way he weaves, it's the voice he takes on, it's the way he weaves in details, it's the way he finds balances and opposites and things that contrast each other. It's the choice of language, but so much of it is kind of like what you were saying, that he just evokes a place or he evokes a time. And I know in one of his books called Writing as a Second Language, which is really a book about a writing curriculum for fifth and sixth graders. But one of the things that stuck with me in that is when he says that storytelling is really a visual art. And that as a storyteller, I see things in my mind and I want to use words and figure out how to put it into words so that you will see in your mind what I see in my mind. And he does that so masterfully. And I think that's in some way the challenge for us as we do personal stories. We have these stories alive in our minds. And I don't know how that folds in with what you've done so far, Regina, or with what you have planned. But that's just what came to my mind as I heard you talking about, that you want to evoke a place or a person. And Donald Davis does that so well. He just talks about a person. But through the person, anecdotes and things come in, but it feels like a story.
Well, why don't we try an experiment, okay? I mean, because now I'm looking at the time and we have half an hour. So this has been wonderful and I hope you're finding this interesting, but let's go try to make a story. Some of you may have brought a story that you want to change. Some of you may have no idea. And hopefully you have papers and something to write with. So instead of writing, and this is not a training on anything. This is really an invitation to go into the imaginative minds we have. So we have maybe we have a story we would like to play with. And play is very simple. I just was with a writing group and we were talking about the word play. And we think of children playing and, we know that children play is how they learn. And so all kind of schools that get too rigid too early take away what is really an essential learning for them, which is playing. But somebody said musicians play music. Play is very, very essential. And it is the creative act. It is a creative act. So let's play with the story. And I would love for you to think of a story that you have told or you would like to tell that is rooted in a place, that placed somewhere. And see if you can, by drawing, which goes more to a right brain place than a left brain place. Because if we start writing, especially if we write in pens, we're in our left brains and we're making things perfect. That's not what we want to do. We want to play. Why don't we take a few minutes and draw a place in which a story will take place, a story that, in a place that is a real place for you, and maybe it is a place that a story took place, or for me, I was describing the Balinese temples I was in. No story took place for me in those places. I created the story in those places, but I wanted to evoke those places. So draw a place that you love or you don't love. There may be a place you'd like to write about that has a certain thing about it that you don't love at all. Or draw a place that you do like or you find intriguing. And let's take a few minutes and just try to draw, see what you put in it. If it's outside, you might want to see if there's a weather thing that might be important, or a time of day that might be important. Let's draw the place and let's create this story, but a place you know. Start from the real place, because that's what we're talking about. Start from a real place in your life you'd like to put a story into. Okay? Don't worry about your artwork. This is not an art class. And take one more minute. If you want, you can put in the chat if you want to name a place. And maybe while you're at it, maybe you want to put something that was there. Was there something that was of importance there? Or maybe there was something that was not there. It might have been interesting if you put it there, would change the story somewhat, maybe. Something. It's just setting for your story. So if you put a thing that was not there, you're starting to shift the story. Maybe there's a shift in the weather. Maybe you've got the sun out and then you just, if the sun wasn't out, but there was a sudden cloud up there and it started to rain, that would shift it. It shifts the space and it shifts the feeling of the space. Because you can start to shift your story at any place. It seems like a good entry into a new world. And if you were there in that place and the story happened while you were there, you could put yourself in a stick figure of you. Maybe somebody was with you, so start to put some characters in there. Who was with you when this thing happened or when that conversation took place? Or maybe you want to start to shift by putting somebody in there you wished had been there, or taking somebody out that you had not been there. So start playing a little bit of a game with the characters, but draw them in or erase them out or put a funny hat on them. Or maybe you looked up in the tree if you're outside and there's an alien sitting in the tree all of a sudden in your story. We're playing. Maybe there were some people there who were watching intently, or maybe there were some people there who were ignoring what was happening. Now we're starting to shift this. We've started with a place, we've added maybe some things, we're adding and or subtracting some people. If you want, you can start a whole new picture. This is going real fast because we've only got the hour and a half and we were in a very interesting discussion. So we're just kind of, let's take it out there. Who was there? Who wasn't there? Maybe there was a garbage can with a perfectly gorgeous bouquet of flowers that someone had thrown away. See, that would shift your story, because then maybe that would go into another place in your story there. Or maybe by putting something in there, you realize you had forgotten something that was there. And the people who you add could be your people you know, or they could be totally fictional people, you see. And just take maybe 30 more seconds, and let's come back and see where we've gotten so far. We're bouncing ideas around and letting the imagination play. But we started with a real place where something happened, or were we going to create something that happens? And we know who's there. We know where we are. And there may be hints of a new story coming in. So how about if, would anybody like to share their picture and say where we are, and you know, what there is about the place you liked or didn't like, or do you have any comments about the place, or what you did? Does anybody want to share this madness? This is madness. I never promised you a rose garden, that's the title of a book.
Rachel wants to share. It looks like Priyanka wants to share.
Priyanka wants to share. Okay, great. Okay,
Rachel first. Yeah.
Go for it.
So I couldn't create a new place, but I did have an idea for a children's story. It was winter, and I was so fed up with the mess in my kitchen. And I told my husband that he was just so messy and had left dough, had made a pizza and had left dough all over the place, droppings and drippings. And he said, oh, there was so much dough. He had made put in a double batch of yeast by mistake. He said, I can't see the refrigerator. And so here's my kitchen, and there are the cabinets, and all the cabinets have food spilled on them, and they're all messy, and they're covered with dough. And the same with the sink. He would wash the dishes and wash just the front sides of them. Or he would say they're 98% clean. So I said, this would be great if I had kids. So here are my two kids, a boy and a girl, who are doing all the things that use the witty remarks and infuriating remarks that my husband made. And there is the mother. And so they make a pizza dough, it rises, it covers the stove and the refrigerator and all the cabinets. And the firemen have to come and rescue them and pull them out and take them to the hospital. And so
you started with your kitchen.
Yes.
So it was this, yeah, go on.
So this is a story I have thought about, but what this did was for me to actually, draw something so that maybe someday I'll work on it, instead of just say, well, there are these ideas.
So you actualize them in visual form.
But I'm frustrated because I'm either so rooted to reality with personal stories, or I have these things that I can't really draw and bring into children's books.
Well, the children's authors, I worked for one for years. They're not allowed to do their own illustrations. And they don't even choose their own illustrator. At least this was with a big publishing. The publisher, she had, I guess, final say, but the publishers, supplied the illustrators, so don't worry about it. But you've got your kitchen and then is it based on your real husband and your real kids, or
Yeah, yeah. My husband actually, he washed the tops of dishes and not the bottoms, and or he washed part of it. And he couldn't see other spots, and he said, "Well, it's 97% clean."
Okay, so
And
you've got the beginning of a personal story that is not a personal story.
yeah, I've got some of the dialogue, but I don't know how to do more with it.
Okay, I would run with that yeast image. I love that the yeast just
Yeah, it covered the refrigerator and covered the kitchen.
I love that. I love that. All right. Priyanka? Whoop, share something.
Hi, Regina.
Hey.
Can I go after another person? By then.
Okay, your sound is not working. We're not hearing you.
Hi, Regina. I am driving. Hi, Regina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am driving. So can I go after another person? By then I'll be at home.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Would anybody else like to share what they did? Claire, are you going to be brave? Claire's going to be brave. Okay.
I'll be brave and I'll try to be brief. So when you said to think about a place, and I put in the chat my hometown, if you read the New York Times last Sunday, my hometown was featured rather unflatteringly in the New York Times of Sunday, February, whatever last Sunday was. And the photographs that they chose to show of my crumbling, sad city made me very sad. So that when you said a place that I know my hometown very well. So I drew kind of a little map of my childhood and the places that were important to me. And as I drew each picture, I just just little vignettes, little memories came to mind. But the library was the one that stuck in my mind because, like many of you, I spent many hours in the library. I'm sure this group probably did as well. And the library that I went to as a small child, right up until my adulthood, I had the pleasure of that being the first library that I brought my child to when he was old enough to bring to the library. So that's just thank you for helping me find some memories in those places.
What town is it, Claire?
It's the capital of New York, Albany.
Oh, Albany.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I saw the headlines.
Did you read that article? Don't read that article. Yeah,
Yes, I saw they were saying something.
It was very distressing. So the capital gets on the international stage in a rather uninteresting or unflattering light.
Well, you could do so you could take this little exercise we've just done and create a book, a children's book even, about the wonderful, strange, and exciting and not so exciting, lovely and ugly places of Albany that you love Albany, and as a refutation, refute that article. Go for it.
And actually, what's really cool, one of our native sons is Gregory Maguire of Wicked fame. He was the author of Wicked, which, as you know, is a blockbuster film right now. But he grew up in my neighborhood. His sister was one of my good friends. And some of his books that he's written are, I can see, talking about recognizing places and people in stories, but the way he describes buildings and streets, I know what he's talking about, but they're not in Albany at all. They're in a completely different part of the world. But anyhow, he's our famous native son, I feel, needs to come to our rescue.
Well, but I instantly, when you described this, could see just a book with, these places. But then my mind goes in those strange ways. Yeah.
Me too. And I felt like you were saying, "Nyeh, nyeh, 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 nyeh."
And that was one of the stories I told the 3-year-olds today. We had good fun with it. Anybody else have any take on this? This was a very kind of all over the map, literally, as assignment, but it was like, take a place. Did you draw a place, Eric? Did you try to draw anything?
And
Oh,
Regina, a couple of people have their hands up. I don't know if you can
Okay.
see.
Yeah,
I
I just drew the mountains with some trees.
No?
But please, somebody else go ahead. Shri
Sri
Karuna.
Karuna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Hi, Regina. First of all, I apologize because I joined midway, but it was so interesting. And, Eric was telling about the teenage children and the tribal areas and middle age, all the conversation I thoroughly enjoyed. Um, I could not draw because I was making breakfast for my children and all Sunday late breakfast, India time. So, but I can describe you. So, in my childhood, till I was in my fourth grade, um, Pari, can you reduce the volume, please? Yeah, till I was in my fourth grade, I grew up with my grandmother, maternal grandmother. And this was a coastal town on the east coast of India, above Chennai, where Eric stays. It's called Andhra Pradesh, the state of Andhra Pradesh. So the primary production there was rice, and rice fields look extremely green when just they look like grass, and then slowly change the color when the rice comes in yellow color, and the periphery, the boundaries of each hectare, or we call it as hectare of measurement of a particular piece of land. The periphery is surrounded with coconut palms. And I remember running as a child in these rice fields. Over the years, when I grew up, what I observed is these rice fields are being converted into fish ponds. Fish, which is being cultivated because fish is more profitable to export to other countries like Japan and all that. And rice is not so profitable and it's more hardworking and all that. So now when I don't see that shades of green and not only as fish ponds, as more and more youngsters are in India are doing their engineering and going to other countries and other states and bigger cities for in search of jobs. So the land is being sold because they don't want to come back to the native place or their hometown or birthplace. The land is being sold to real estate people, and nothing is being cultivated. It's just, filled up, leveled up, and made into smaller bits and sold to other people. And it's like a barren land, and that is really, really painful. Still, there are, lots of rice fields. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having rice as our staple diet, which we eat every day for lunch and the dinner. But as not as much as I saw as a child. So that this
Do
is
you
what the place that.
Now, do you have any story from when you were a child about being in the rice field or near the rice field? Do you have a
Yes,
story?
yes, yes. I sometimes I'm an organic storyteller in the sense when there are, a lot of people and 4 or 5 persons have told their story, and I'm on the sixth one, and I feel the same plot of my story which I prepared has been already told. Then I remember making up stories then and there when my turn was coming up and narrating story about me being a child in the rice field and me being asked to study, but what was being taught in school of a seed germinating in my science class, I literally saw as a child, which was happening in the field out there. So I had created this kind of story earlier and told it out there organically, but I didn't write it down. I have narrated the story like that. Yeah.
So you have a real place, but you could put some things that never happened, but you can evoke your beautiful, wonderful place that's now been desecrated, being desecrated. But within that, you can set a story, so you can share that space and your love of that space, but have that story that takes place there that did or did not take place there. Yeah. did or did not.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really loved what you said about play. We need to play. If we don't play, life becomes extremely, there is a difference between, I had a quote somewhere, there is a difference between existing and living, you know. All of us exist, we breathe, we grow, the cells decay, and, new cells keep forming. We are just there. But as long as we learn to find joy in little things and each moment, that's when, we live each moment. And when you said about the play, children play and they learn from playing, that's what came up to my mind. Yes, we need to have that playful spirit alive in us. Thank you so much, Regina. Over to somebody else.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, all right, Priyanka, are you off this? You are off the road now.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. So the actual story incident happened in 2011 November during my first solo travel. But this is the story that I made up during this particular workshop based on that particular place. Hawaii, Oahu, the beautiful coastal place where the scuba dive and the snorkeling takes place. And our protagonist, a 32-year-old lady, along with two of her college juniors, were there to spend the Thanksgiving weekend. And all the Friday sales were over, so they almost ran. Their wallet was almost gone. But she was there only for 2 days during this particular weekend because she flew from the mainland and she got only 2 days. And Hawaii is not a place that you can cover everything in 2 days, right? We all know that. But she wanted to club everything together, Black Friday sale during the night, and then going to Maui on the same day and coming back. And then this was Sunday morning. She went for a skydiving. She came back at 4 o'clock. And at that time, with her college juniors, they were at the beach doing scuba. 5 o'clock. The scuba was over, the sun was setting in the west, and suddenly something started happening in her body. Her body crumpled and she started nauseating. Her two college juniors immediately came and started saying, Shushmati, what has happened? And they tried to rescue her along with the help of the Coast Guard. And cut to 7 o'clock, she was in the hospital and lying down there, and she could hear doctor speaking, paralysis, paralysis, paralysis. And she doesn't remember anything. The next week, 1 week has passed by, and she doesn't know where it all went. She wanted to go to the loo, getting up in the morning, and all that she realized is she has a bedpan beside, and she can't lift the right side of her body. And while she called the friend, the junior that was sitting beside her bed, she tried to tell something. She couldn't, because she couldn't move the right side of her lips. And then she saw.
Can I ask you, is this a true story, or is
No,
this
no.
a fictional
No.
story?
It's a
Okay.
fictional story starting from the same place and the same incident that I went on scuba diving with my college juniors in Oahu during the Black Friday holiday. Yeah. Because of time, I'm just cutting it short. At the end, while her bag was being cleaned when she was home, she saw with her left hand, because now only the right side is operational. She was about to throw a leaflet that was given during the scuba diving and skydiving both, where it was written, before throwing it in the dustbin, she saw and she stopped. Because in the don'ts, it is written on the same day when you are doing scuba diving, you cannot skydive. And on the same day when you do skydive, you can't scuba dive.
Right.
Then she came to know about decompression illness and paralysis and stuff.
Wow.
So it actually was about to happen to me because I wanted to do them both within the span of 24 hours, which is strictly prohibited.
Right.
So from your workshop, I got inspired to see what hasn't happened, what would have happened if it would have happened. Yeah.
Oh, fiction from fact. And I'm glad it didn't happen.
Me too.
Me too. Well, my gosh, we're almost out of time. And we barely scratched the surface on this. All I can say is I encourage you to start to explore and really explore, where you can take things if there's some thing that happened or some place that you love or some person that you met and you want to tell the story about it, see where, play. And drawing, I know for some people it's very frightening to be drawing, but drawing can take you places where you didn't think you would go. Because once you start to really write, you're into the absolute, it has to be perfect, and this has to make sense and blah, blah, blah. But when you're drawing, a whole other messages are going to your brain. And maybe a door will open that you had no idea that door was there. So if there's anything I want to say is, don't be afraid to explore, because you can always go back to the home base, but the home base then will be richer for the explorations. Yeah. Wow.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely great message, Regina. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the workshop. A
Yeah.
very interesting experience. For me, especially thinking about place and basing the situation in place and letting all the other variables vary.
Yeah, very.
Mhm.
Let them, you know what? It's always fun to bring an alien spaceship and see what they have to say about what they're observing.
Mhm.
Or the mirror on the wall who can tell the story backwards.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.